Hello. Today we will look at Chapter 5, Section 2 in our government textbooks. Chapter 5, Section 2 begins on page 140, and it is about how Congress is organized. So, if we remember from our last textbook notes and video, Congress is the lawmaking part or legislative branch of our government, and there are two parts. There is the House and there is the Senate. And the Senate has 100 members, two from every state. The House has 435 members based on population. This House, those members all serve 2-year terms and can run for reelection. And the Senate, they serve 6-year terms, and then they can also run for reelection. So every 2 years, we have elections for the whole House and 1/3 of the Senate. And each 2 years term of a Congress is called a session. So a session of Congress lasts 2 years. We always have elections in November of even numbered years. So if I would run for Congress and win, I would never win, but if I could win, I would win in an election in November of 2020 or 2022 or 2024 in an even numbered November. Then I wouldn't take office. I wouldn't be sworn in and become a representative until January 3rd of that next year. So if I won in November 2022, I could be sworn in and I would become a congressman and actually get to vote and introduce bills on January 3rd of that next year, so 2 months later. That was all determined by the 20th Amendment to the US Constitution, if you remember our amendments. Moving on, the next part of Chapter 5, Section 2 shows the organizational structure of Congress. And so definitely look at page 141 and these two charts. The House and the Senate are organized similarly, but there are some key differences, and they certainly use some different terms. So the parties, these days we have two main parties in this country, the Republicans and the Democrats. And those two parties meet as a party. All the Democratic senators will get together, all the Republican senators will get together, same thing in the House, and they'll meet just as parties, and those are often called caucuses. And those caucuses of party members really determine a lot of what happens and how the structure of the House or the Senate look. So if there are more Democrats in the House of Representatives, the Democrats basically control a lot of that organizational structure. And then if there are more Republicans at that same time in the Senate, Republicans determine in a lot of ways how that Senate structure looks. So if Democrats control both, Democrats would have control. If Republicans control both, Republicans would have control. In the House, all of the members of the House elect their leader. So if there are more Republicans than Democrats, they will almost always elect a Republican leader, and vice versa if there are more Democrats. That leader of the House is called the Speaker of the House, and so we should know that. In the Senate, the Constitution says that the Vice President of the United States is actually the President of the Senate or the leader of the Senate, but it has turned out in history that the Vice President almost never goes and acts as President of the Senate. So instead, the person sort of in control of the Senate is called the President pro tempore, or often just President pro tem for short. And that is almost always the longest serving member of the majority party in the US Senate. And so two terms, majority party and minority party, are very important here. The majority party is just whichever political party has more members, usually over half. And the minority party is the party with fewer members. So for example, if Republicans had 55 seats in the US Senate, Democrats would have probably 45 seats. That makes 100. The Republicans would be the majority party. They have a majority of seats with 55, and the Democrats would be the minority party. In that case, the Republicans then, from their own members, would decide who is president pro tem, and it would almost always be the Republican who had served in the US Senate the longest. From there, on the Senate side, they elect whatever party is in control, has a majority of seats. They elect their own majority leader from within that party caucus. And the minority does the same thing. The minority leader is elected from the party with fewer seats. The House does the exact same thing. There's a majority leader and a minority leader in the House. On the Senate side, that majority leader is actually the person with the most control, at least for the last many decades of how the Senate works, the person with the most control over the Senate. In many, many ways, the majority leader in the Senate functions very much like the Speaker of the House over on the House side. There are some other interesting roles of leadership in the House and the Senate, and the coolest named one is the whip. And so there are both majority and minority whips in both the House and the Senate. And the whip's job, elected by the members of their own party, is to basically count votes, is to say, look, if the Democrats submit a bill and they want to get it passed and become a law, well, they better first make sure all the Democrats support it. And so the whip's job is to go count and make sure that all the Democrats are on board in that example. Republicans do the exact same thing. And then, of course, often you need support from across the aisle, as they say, from the other party as well. And so other representatives or senators' job is to do that. So the chapter then moves on and talks more specifically about the speaker, as we discussed, and other roles on the Senate and House side, but also very, very importantly, and we will talk more about this in the next section, once a bill is introduced, it is then assigned to a committee. And so rather than a bill first going before all 100 senators or all 435 representatives, almost every bill goes to a committee first of a small group of those senators or representatives, where that small group talks and votes and does lots of work before it ever comes to the full House or full Senate. So fairly short, chapter 5, section 2. That wraps it up. See you next time with chapter 5, section 3.